An investigation would uncover the twisted secrets of his marriage to 39-year-old corporate executive Veronica Hale, a woman whose ambition knew no limits. But the horror didn't end there. 12 days later, police returned to the same house and made another gruesome discovery. In March 2011, the world first learned the name Veronica Hale. By November 2011, she would be known as Monster Mom. At 8:12 a.m. on March 6, 2011, the emergency call came through, a neighbor screaming for help. Officers from the Springfield Police Department were dispatched immediately to 177 Willow Heights Lane, a quiet, upscale neighborhood known for its pristine lawns and high-end homes. The responding officers arrived within minutes, their sirens piercing through the morning air. The neighborhood, usually calm and routine, had become the epicenter of something sinister. A small group of neighbors had already gathered outside, their eyes filled with shock and curiosity. But it was Marjorie Douglas, the woman who had placed the call, who stood closest to the scene, her face pale, her hands shaking. The moment officers stepped inside the grand house, the smell of blood hit them first. A thick, metallic scent, impossible to ignore. The air was still, heavy with something unseen. And then they saw him. Nathan Hale, 42, lay sprawled on the marble floor, his body twisted unnaturally. Blood pooled beneath his head, seeping into the tiny cracks between the tiles, turning the glossy white surface into a horrifying scene. His face was unrecognizable, his skull fractured in multiple places, as if someone had struck him over and over again, long after he was already dead. Just a few feet away, the weapon lay where it had fallen, a glass paperweight, heavy and smeared with blood and strands of hair. It had once been nothing more than a decorative object on his wife's office desk, but now it had become a brutal instrument of death. The lead investigator, Detective Samuel Graves, had seen many crime scenes in his years on the force. But something about this one felt different. Too clean, too careful, too personal. He scanned the room carefully. No signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no shattered locks. The security system had remained untouched. That meant one thing: whoever did this was already inside the house. Officers immediately began securing the crime scene. The forensic team arrived within minutes, cameras flashing as they documented every gruesome detail. The front door had been left slightly ajar, as if someone had either left in a hurry or wanted the body to be found. There was no sign of a struggle in the entryway, no overturned furniture, no broken glass, suggesting that Nathan hadn't seen the attack coming. It was deliberate, calculated. Then came the next question. Where was Veronica Hale? Nathan's wife, Veronica, 39, was known in Springfield as a woman of power. A high-ranking corporate executive, the kind of woman who always seemed in control. She had built an empire with her business acumen, her polished image, her ability to command attention the moment she entered a room. But now, she was nowhere to be seen. The officers spread out through the house, moving cautiously. The luxury home was eerily silent, every room untouched, every object in its place. The scent of freshly brewed coffee still lingered in the air. It was as if life had been moving forward as normal, right up until the moment of death. Upstairs, the search ended at the master bedroom. Veronica was there. She lay still in bed, staring at the ceiling, her body rigid, her breathing shallow. The curtains were drawn, but light peeked through the edges, casting faint golden streaks across the room. She did not flinch when the officers entered. She did not sit up. She did not ask what was happening. She just stared. Her nightgown was pristine, no blood, no signs of struggle. Detective Graves moved closer, studying her face. Expressionless, distant, empty. When officers finally spoke to her, her voice was barely above a whisper. She claimed to remember nothing. She said she had woken up just moments before, and she said she had no idea how her husband ended up at the bottom of the stairs, how his skull had been shattered beyond recognition. She said she did not know what had happened, and yet her fingerprints were on the murder weapon. By March 8th, 2011, Veronica was brought in for formal questioning. Investigators had already begun piecing together fragments of the couple's life. They learned about a marriage full of tension, of power struggles, of quiet resentments. Nathan had been the softer one, the one who stayed home when their twin children were sick, the one who planned birthdays and made sure the fridge was stocked. Veronica, on the other hand, was the force, the authority, the one who earned the real money, the one who made the rules. People in their social circle often said the same thing. Nathan adored her, and Veronica, she tolerated him. But why had she killed him? The questioning was relentless. Investigators watched her closely, waiting for cracks in her story, waiting for a moment of guilt to creep into her voice. But Veronica Hale was not like other suspects. She did not panic. She did not plead. She simply sat there, her gaze sharp, her posture controlled. She did not ask about Nathan. She did not ask about what would happen next. She just waited. And then, before they could charge her, before they could fully unravel the truth behind Nathan Hale's brutal murder, something happened. 12 days later, on March 18th, 2011, the same house, the same quiet street, the same tragic home, 2 more bodies were found. At 9:47 a.m. on March 9th, 2011, detectives sat in a dimly lit interrogation room reviewing the latest findings. The case against Veronica Hale was growing, but something was missing. Her fingerprints on the blood-stained paperweight weren't enough. There had to be a reason, a motive, a breaking point. They had spent the past 3 days reconstructing the life of Nathan and Veronica Hale, a marriage that had appeared perfect on the outside but was unraveling beneath the surface. What they found was far darker than they had expected. Nathan and Veronica had been together for 12 years. They had met in their mid-20s, back when Nathan was full of optimism, believing he had found a partner who was not just his wife, but his best friend. He was a high school teacher, a man who loved books, old jazz records, and Sunday mornings at the park with his children. He had always been soft-spoken, the kind of person who never raised his voice even when he should have. Veronica, however, was a force of nature. She had started as an intern in a finance firm and, within a decade, had climbed to the top. People respected her, feared her. She was brilliant, ruthless, and always in control. She wore expensive suits, drove a luxury car, and never let anyone, especially Nathan, forget who was in charge. By 2010, her salary was nearly 5 times what Nathan made. She paid for the house, she paid for the vacations, she paid for everything, and in return, she owned everything. Nathan had always known he earned less than his wife, but at some point, it stopped feeling like a marriage and started feeling like a business arrangement. Veronica controlled the accounts. Veronica controlled the decisions. Veronica controlled him. She made it clear he was replaceable. By August 2010, things had reached a breaking point. Nathan had begun to notice strange changes in Veronica. She was coming home later and later. Some nights, she didn't come home at all. When he asked, she would laugh. Not explain, not apologize, just laugh, as if the idea that he deserved an answer was ridiculous. But by November 2010, the truth started to emerge. Veronica was having an affair, and not just with anyone, with Ethan Carter, a 27-year-old investment banker who worked at her firm. Ethan was young, charming, dangerously ambitious. He idolized Veronica, admired her power, wanted to be just like her. He didn't just love her, he wanted to be her. Their affair had started in early 2010, but it had escalated into something obsessive. They traveled together. They spent weekends in luxury hotels. They spoke in secret messages, late-night calls, stolen moments. Nathan found out in December, and he was done. He hired a lawyer. He planned to file for divorce in March 2011. He was going to fight for full custody of the twins, knowing that Veronica's career and erratic lifestyle would make her look unfit in court. Veronica could not allow that to happen. She was not just a mother, she was the mother. The children were hers, the house was hers, the life she built was hers. Nathan was the weak link, and she would not lose. At 11:26 p.m. on March 5th, 2011, the night before the murder, Veronica made up her mind. She had to eliminate Nathan, but it had to be clean, calculated. If she was going to kill him, she had to make sure she would never be caught. By midnight, she had the perfect plan. At 7:45 p.m. on March 5th, 2011, Veronica stood in the kitchen pouring a glass of red wine. Nathan was grading papers at the table, looking exhausted, unaware that his last night alive had already begun. She watched him for a moment, then reached into the cabinet where she kept her prescription medications. Inside was Zolpidem, a powerful sleeping pill she had been prescribed months earlier for insomnia. She crushed 2 pills into powder. Then she stirred it into his wine. By 8:20 p.m., Nathan was visibly drowsy. His speech had slowed, his body slumping slightly in his chair. He didn't notice the way Veronica was watching him, didn't realize that she had already sealed his fate. By 8:45 p.m., Nathan stood up to go to bed. By 9:10 p.m., he was unconscious, and by 9:45 p.m., Veronica stood over him, holding the heavy glass paperweight from her office. She lifted it once, she brought it down. The first blow crushed the side of his skull, blood splattered across the silk bedsheets. The second shattered his cheekbone, the third ended his life. But Veronica did not stop. She kept swinging even after he was gone, making sure that if an autopsy was done, the forensic pathologists would never know exactly which blow had killed him. When she was done, she calmly stepped into the bathroom. She washed her hands, removed her nightgown, and placed it in the laundry. She stood in front of the mirror and took a deep breath. And then she slept. When the police arrived at 8:12 a.m. on March 6, 2011, Veronica was already in bed, calm and dazed. She had practiced what she would say. She played the part of the grieving wife. And she said she had no memory of what happened. She said she just woke up. For a while, it worked. But she made one fatal mistake. She thought she had covered everything. She thought she had planned every detail. But when detectives began to investigate deeper, they would uncover a secret that Veronica never planned for. A mistake that would cost her everything. A mistake that would expose her for the monster she truly was. At 6:17 p.m. on March 18, 2011, a Springfield police dispatcher received a second call from 177 Willow Heights Lane. This time, the voice on the other end wasn't frantic, it wasn't loud or panicked like before, it was distant, almost detached. The neighbor who called was unsure if there was even an emergency. Something smelled off. Marjorie Douglas, the woman who had made the first 911 call 12 days earlier, had noticed a terrible odor drifting from the Hale house. At first, she ignored it, assuming it was spoiled food or a dead animal nearby. But by late afternoon, the smell had become overwhelming, rotting, sour, wrong. She knocked on the front door. No answer. She peered through the windows. The house was silent. Too silent. The blinds were drawn. The yard was overgrown from days of neglect. And for the first time since Nathan's death, something about the house felt off in a way she couldn't explain. By 6:29 p.m., officers arrived. The front door was locked. They pounded on it, expecting Veronica to answer, but Veronica was nowhere to be found. And when they forced the door open, they were hit with the full force of the smell. One officer gagged. Another stumbled back, covering his mouth. It was the unmistakable stench of death. The house, which had been so clean and pristine on March 6th, was now a lifeless shell. Dust had settled on the furniture. Plates from an unfinished meal were still on the dining table. A child's stuffed toy lay on the floor, untouched for days. And then the silence was broken. A single fly buzzed through the air, drifting lazily toward the staircase. The officers followed it. At 6:34 p.m., they reached the children's bedrooms. The doors were closed. No one was inside to open them. And when they pushed them open, the horror revealed itself. Lying in separate beds, 6-year-old Noah and Emma Hale were dead. Their bodies were frail, their lips cracked and dry. Their once bright skin had turned pale and sunken. Their tiny hands, still curled on the blankets, looked like they had simply gone to sleep and never woken up. But they had suffered. The autopsy would later confirm what the detectives already knew. They had died of starvation. There was no blood, no wounds, no signs of struggle. They had simply been left alone for too long. At 6:58 p.m., detectives pieced together the horrifying truth. Veronica Hale had never intended to kill her children. She had simply forgotten them. After killing Nathan, she had been too focused on covering her tracks, too busy making sure the murder looked like an accident, too caught up in protecting herself. So she left. On the night of March 6th, less than 10 hours after the police discovered Nathan's body, she had packed a small designer suitcase and vanished. She checked into an expensive hotel in downtown Springfield under a fake name. She turned off her phone. She met Ethan Carter, her lover, and they spent the next 11 days together. She ordered expensive wine. She dined at 5-star restaurants. She lounged by the pool in a silk robe, sipping cocktails and watching the sunset. Meanwhile, back at 177 Willow Heights Lane, her children sat in their bedrooms waiting for their mother to return. They must have been confused at first. She had never left them alone before. Maybe they knocked on the door. Maybe they called out for her. But no one answered. No one came. The kitchen was just downstairs, but the twins couldn't reach it. The fridge was stocked. The pantry was full. But the doors to the kitchen had been locked from the outside, something detectives later confirmed was routine in the Hale house to prevent mess. By March 10th, the children were weaker. By March 12th, their bodies began to shut down. By March 14th, Emma stopped crying out for help. By March 16th, Noah had stopped moving altogether. And by March 18th, when the officers finally pushed open their bedroom doors, it was too late. At 8:24 p.m. on March 20th, 2011, Veronica Hale was finally located. She wasn't hiding, she wasn't running. She was sitting poolside at a luxury hotel in Miami, Florida, sipping a cocktail. She had changed her hair. She had bought a new dress. She was flirting with a hotel bartender, laughing at a joke she had already forgotten. She had abandoned her children, but her life had continued without hesitation. Detectives approached quietly, watching her for a moment. She seemed at peace. They could almost believe she was just another rich woman on vacation until she turned and met their eyes, and that was when they saw it. Not fear, not regret, not shock, just recognition, as if she had always known this moment would come. At 8:32 p.m., they placed her in handcuffs. Hotel guests turned to watch, whispers spreading like wildfire. The bartender she had been talking to took a step back, his smile dropping. She never resisted. She never asked why she was being arrested. She never cried. She just smiled. As the officers led her away, she didn't even look back at the life she was leaving behind. She never apologized, and she never mourned. She never once asked about Noah and Emma. By 9:15 p.m., Veronica Hale was booked into a Miami detention center, and at 9:27 p.m., detectives received a single text from Ethan Carter. It was short. One sentence. A question, as if he still couldn't believe what he had just heard. The kids, they're dead. Because even he hadn't known. Veronica had never told him. To her, it wasn't important. And that was how the world finally saw her for what she really was. Not a grieving widow, not a tragic mother, but a monster. At 8:31 a.m. on November 8, 2011, the doors of the Springfield Circuit Courthouse swung open and a wave of journalists, spectators, and legal analysts poured inside. It was the first day of what had become the most sensational trial in the city's history. People had gathered hours earlier, some waiting in the cold just for the chance to glimpse the woman now known as Monster Mom. Veronica Hale was being tried for 3 counts of first-degree murder. Nathan Hale, her husband, Noah Hale, her 6-year-old son, Emma Hale, her 6-year-old daughter. The names echoed through the courtroom as the charges were read aloud, the weight of those names, the weight of what she had done. At 8:43 a.m., she was led inside wearing a crisp white blouse and a fitted blazer. Her hair, freshly washed and neatly parted, framed her face in sharp angles. She did not look like a woman who had lost everything. She did not look broken, regretful, or even afraid. Instead, she looked bored. She took her seat as if she was sitting in a business meeting, not a murder trial. By 8:51 a.m., the prosecution took the floor. They wasted no time, and they painted a picture of a woman who did not grieve, who did not love, who did not feel. A woman who saw her own husband as a nuisance, a woman who saw her children as obligations. She had killed because it was convenient. She had abandoned her children because they were in her way. And she had sat poolside, sipping cocktails in Miami while their small bodies withered in locked rooms. By 9:22 a.m., the prosecution presented crime scene photos. Nathan Hale's body, his skull, shattered beyond recognition. The twins, still in their pajamas, too weak to even crawl to the door before their bodies shut down. A woman in the jury covered her mouth, fighting back nausea. A man in the back row turned away, unable to look. But Veronica did not blink. She did not flinch. She simply crossed her legs and waited for it to be over. At 10:14 a.m., the prosecution called its most important witness, Ethan Carter. The 27-year-old man she had nearly thrown her entire life away for. The man she had spent 11 days with after the murder, pretending as if nothing had happened. He entered the courtroom looking drained, paler than usual, as if he hadn't slept in days. He had not spoken to Veronica since her arrest. He took a deep breath, gripping the sides of the witness stand. And then, for the first time, he told the world what it had been like to love her. He told them how she had never cried, how she had never told him about the children, how she had spent every day of their getaway laughing, drinking, living as if she had nothing to worry about, how he had only found out about the twins when he saw it on the news. He had asked her, begged her to explain. And her response? cold, indifferent, like she barely even remembered having children. At 10:43 a.m., Ethan's voice cracked. He did not defend her. He did not plead on her behalf. He only said one thing over and over again: that he had never known what kind of woman she really was. For the first time, Veronica's expression changed. She did not cry. She did not break down. She only stared at Ethan, as if he were a child who had disappointed her, as if he were someone she had already erased from her mind, as if he no longer existed. At 2:14 p.m. on November 22nd, 2011, the jury left the courtroom. At 5:17 p.m., they returned. 3 hours, that was all it took. In a case with multiple murders, months of evidence, and hundreds of testimonies, the jury needed only 3 hours. The entire courtroom fell silent. Veronica stood, perfectly composed. And then the words rang out: guilty on all charges. She did not flinch, she did not cry, she did not fight. Instead, she simply tilted her head slightly, as if she had been expecting it all along. And when the judge asked if she had anything to say before sentencing, she finally spoke. Not to plead for her life, not to show remorse, but to remind them of one final truth. She only muttered 2 words: "I always win." The gavel struck, and Veronica Hale was sentenced to life without parole. She would never walk free again. And yet, as she was led out of the courtroom at 5:46 p.m., she did something no one expected. She smirked, as if she had won anyway. Even years later, the case of Veronica Hale remains one of the most shocking true crime stories of the decade. A woman who had everything: wealth, power, success, threw it all away. She wasn't just a cheater. She wasn't just a liar. She was a monster. And she will rot in a prison cell forever. Make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on our daily updates, and you can check out another insane case we have, the case where a Texas wife's affair with her brother-in-law was exposed at a gender reveal party and ended brutally. Make sure to check it out and let us know what you think in the comments.